I love living in France, but one of the things I miss most about England is the pubs and specifically the pub lunches. I remember the place we used to go when we lived down in the New Forest. We used to go to a place called the Turf Cutters Arms, and it was the sort of pub you imagine. It's got low beams and it's got leather sofas and it's got a roaring fire. And they used to do the most amazing individual beef Wellingtons. And we'd go for a walk and then we'd come to the pub and then we'd sit and we'd normally have friends with us and we'd sit and eat these beef Wellingtons, these massive portions. And we'd spend the afternoon talking and chatting in this cosy environment. And it's something that really you don't get anywhere else. This is not a restaurant, this is a pub, and there's an important difference. Welcome to the European Compass podcast, the Eating Europe series, where we explore the heart of Europe through its food, its markets, and the stories behind every dish. I'm your host, Julia Doust, and if you've ever planned a trip around a meal, then you're in the right place. Let's dig in. So what do you imagine when you think of a pub, an English pub? You might have an image of a cosy place with low doorways and beams and a log fire and kind of darkly lit. Or maybe what you're imagining is more like an EastEnders, where it's the hub of the community with Victorian furniture and everybody knows everybody else. Or maybe it's even the image of a American Werewolf in London, where if you walked into the pub and opened the door, all the locals would stare and look at you and everything would go silent. And that's not really what pubs are about these days. There is an image, yes, you probably will find a EastEnders type pub somewhere, but most pubs aren't like that. And most pubs do really good food. It's one of the best, as far as I'm concerned. It's one of the best ways of eating well in England, and particularly in London, for not too much money. They're good value, good prices, and yet there's still this image somehow that that's not what you go to a pub for. Maybe you think that you go to a pub to drink. That's true, you do go to a pub to drink. There's no getting around that. There is still very much pubs are there to serve alcohol. Maybe that's why you don't want to go in a pub. Maybe you think that you've got to drink, and actually that's not at all the case these days. There's so many different options for if you don't want alcohol, and no one will bat an eyelid if you go in and order a Coke, or you go in and order a fruit juice, or all the plethora of different non-alcohol drinks there are these days. Even non-alcoholic beers, all the pubs will have it. So don't let that stop you. Most pubs these days serve food, and it can be very, very good food. You might also feel that somehow going in a pub isn't your place, that maybe they're not there for tourists. Maybe you think that you need to have some sort of invitation to go in, or that somehow if you're not local you won't be welcome, and that maybe you're just confused. Maybe you think, well, if I go in a pub, then what do I do? How do I deal with this? And I can understand that. It's not the same as a restaurant. You don't go into a pub in the same way as a restaurant and know what the menu is, and be given the menu when you first arrive and be shown to your table. Some pubs are like that. Some pubs do have a restaurant side, and those act more like a restaurant. So yes, some pubs have a restaurant attached, but other pubs, it's a pub that serves food. And that can be a bit confusing. I've heard of lots of people, I've heard of travellers, of French travellers and Italian travellers that go in a pub and sit down and wait 3/4 of an hour and then complain that they haven't been served. Well, you won't get served. You have to go to the bar. So the premise of a pub is it still stays as a pub. So it is a bar. Quite often when you go in, it'll be in the middle and there'll be seating around. Sometimes it's off to one side. Depending on the pub, sometimes there's several rooms and the bar's in one room. But there'll always be a bar, and it won't just be like a little counter. It's a long bar. And so in order to be served, you have to go up to the bar and ask. And quite often you'll have to even ask for the menu. So go up to the bar. I generally will go in, go up to the bar, I'll ask for my drink first, ask if they're doing food, get the menu, go find myself a table, and then look at the menu. And then when I'm ready to order, I go back up to the bar. So you go back to the bar, you place your order. Normally you have to pay at that point. So you pay when you order. In the same way the drinks, you order the drinks and then you pay for the drinks. In some places you can run a tab, so keep everything in one place and then pay at the end. But in most places, really, you're going to be paying as you order. And then you'll sit down and someone will bring your food to you. Generally, sometimes you might have a number called out, but generally your food will be brought to you. And there's no reason not to go in these places. Generally, honestly, pubs, they're just happy for your service. They really are. They're just happy to see customers. It's pretty rare to find a pub these days where it's just for locals, where you're going to be treated as some sort of outsider. You might get a bit of banter, you might not. There might be some locals there might not. But there's no reason for that to stop you. And honestly, it's somewhere I feel that as a woman, if I'm travelling on my own, I far rather go into a pub and eat in a pub on my own than I would a restaurant. It's far less intimidating. You've got someone to talk to straight away. You go up to the barman, you've got someone to talk to straight away. And then you can find yourself the table of your choice, so you don't have to rely on this waitress putting you in a corner somewhere or wherever. You get to choose, and you can get to choose whether you want to sit near the bar. You can even sit at the bar. Most bars have got a bar stool. You can even sit at the bar. So being on your own, and there's always someone on their own in a pub. Always. There's always someone that's come in to have a quick drink or a bite to eat or whatever. So honestly, if you're travelling on your own, it's a good tip. Go to the pub. What are you actually going to get to eat in a pub? Is a question. There is a different type of food. Okay, it's probably the place you'll find what might be described as classic British compared to other restaurants. It's one of the few places where classic British is still the norm. So you are going to find there's a classic type of food that might be called pub grub. And if you say that to an Englishman, they know what you mean by pub grub, and they've instantly got something in their mind. Their thing in their mind might be pie and chips. It might be scampi and chips. It might be hunter's chicken and chips. Chips figure quite a lot on pub menus. You might get mash as well, but chips are pretty high up there. You nearly always these days are going to get a vegetarian option. That's pretty standard anyway. You're going to get a vegetarian option. Quite often you'll have a lighter option for lunch. You might have some sort of club sandwich or some sort of toasted sandwich even, or a ploughman's. Ploughman's is a good. So ploughman's is you will get bits of things. So you might get a bit of pork pie and a bit of cheese and a bit of salad and some bread and some butter, and so it's a sort of compilation dish. The ploughman's are rarer these days, but they're a good option. And it's often good. However, it's often very bad. So this is the distinction. Quite a lot of pubs get their food brought in frozen. They order it from a company called Breaks Brothers or another company, and they have a classic list of pub grub that you can order from, and they keep it in their freezer and they just defrost it whenever someone orders food. Now, obviously, that's not going to be the best food. It can be fine. It can be okay. It can be perfectly edible. And sometimes that's what you're looking for, just something quick, let's eat and then get on. But there are other pubs that go the extra mile. There are other pubs that are making homemade pies, that are making homemade soups, that are really giving a great food. And those are the ones you want to look out for. Not always easy to find them. You'll find, if you look on Google Maps, so say you're looking for somewhere to eat and you're looking on Google Maps. One of the things I find is that if you search for restaurant on Google Maps, the pubs won't show. Now, in a lot of cases in England, that means you've cut out more than half the number of places that you can eat. I would say probably even 75% in some places, because that's where the food is. It's in the pubs. So when you are looking on Google Maps, you're going to need to look for pub as well as restaurant. And I'm not sure you can really use the reviews as a guide in terms of the numbers. If you're going to get anything between 4 and 4.5, that's your standard pub. Most things you're going to have to be pretty bad to get below a 4. Because most people, they're going in, they're having a pint, they're leaving. They're not necessarily going to review the food in the same ways they might with a restaurant. However, if you see places that are routinely getting 4.8, 4.9, then the food's good, because you don't get that from a normal pub. So that's one place to start. Obviously, anywhere that's giving out awards for pub food and things, another good place to start. One thing that's actually interesting these days is they've brought in a rule in the UK that means that anywhere where there are more than 250 employees has to display the calorie content of each item on a menu. Now, this is reasonably new. It certainly wasn't there when I lived in the UK. But what this means is that because the 250 employees is throughout the company, then pub chains, I'm thinking of things like Wetherspoons, which is a big pub chain, not great food, or other pub chains are classed within that, and so they have their calorie content on their menu. And in my experience, those are quite often the ones that have been bringing in their food. Your individual pub that's not got very many employees or a small chain don't have to put their calorie content on the menu. So this is a little trick, is that if there is no calorie content on the menu, then maybe you're in for a better meal. I'm not saying that ones with calorie content on are all bad. I'm just saying this might give you a little tip. So has it always been like this in the UK? No, it hasn't always been like this in the UK. So when I was growing up, pubs didn't really do food. In general, pubs were places where you went to drink. So you went to drink pints. Mostly men went to drink pints. My dad would go to the pub after work. My dad would go to the pub after work and he'd have 3 pints before coming home. And that was fairly standard. It was not an unusual thing for men to do. And certainly on payday in a lot of places, things like mining communities and things like this, that's where you would find the men on payday. And then little by little, I think late 70s, 80s, things started to change. A few pubs started to offer food. One of the first things they used to offer is they used to have these plastic baskets, and you used to get scampi and chips in a basket. So your chips would go in the basket and then your scampi would go on top. And it was one of the first things I remember getting in a pub. Scampi and chips, or you could get chicken as well, chicken and chips. You get like a chicken leg that had been deep fried and put into these baskets. And that was where things were in the 1980s. And then they started to develop and started to realise that actually food brought people in, and food meant that people stayed longer and spent more money. And so more and more pubs were doing food. And then there was a step change in probably 1990s, early 1990s, when something called the gastropub started. A gastropub was basically a pub that was focusing on the gastronomy rather than the pub. So it was a gastropub was there to serve food as its primary purpose rather than to drink as its primary purpose. And the idea was to kind of get rid of this old image of old blokes standing around the pub with drinking their pints. that was stopping maybe lots of customers coming in for the food, and to try and say, look, we can do really good food, come and eat our food. And it made a massive swing towards the quality of food that you could get in pubs, and the number of people who would go in pubs, and the type of food you could get in pubs. And it really made a difference. And one of the things that now is where pubs really, really shine is Sundays. So the Sunday lunch, this is another subject, the Sunday lunch in England. So Sundays are, from a French perspective, Sundays are a bit strange in England in that all shops are open. So your supermarkets are open, your high streets are open, and it looks like a normal day. It looked like a normal day until you push the door of a pub. Because pubs on Sundays are not the same as pubs during the week, and certainly the food that is served in a pub on a Sunday is not the same as the food you will get the rest of the week because of the Sunday lunch. Now, the Sunday lunch it's a tradition in England that goes back centuries, that people would put their meat onto roast, go to church, come back and have a big meal. So they'd have Sunday lunch. And it's absolute classic. Every Sunday you'd have a Sunday lunch. When I was growing up, Sundays were sacred. You had your Sunday lunch. So you have your meat and your roast potatoes and your vegetables and your gravy. And pubs realised this and started serving Sunday lunches. And as time's gone by and women have got busier and really can't be hassled with spending all day in the kitchen cooking Sunday lunch for everybody, it's almost become that a pub is where you eat Sunday lunch. If you say to someone, are we going to go for Sunday lunch? They mean in a pub. And this is now a ritual. It really has become, it's a cultural identity that maybe travellers haven't realised, and maybe travellers haven't experienced this, but you should. If you're in England on a Sunday, go to the pub. But what I will say is you need to book. So if somewhere does a good Sunday lunch, it will be fully booked. So you have to book in advance. And some people will book from one week to the next to make sure they get their tables. But you do have to book for Sunday lunch. Even if you've booked, you'll still go in, you'll say you've booked, but you still have to order at the bar generally and things like this. The menu will be different. The menu will be a Sunday menu. So you won't have the normal things that you get on the menu. You will have your Sunday lunch menu. Sometimes that will include pies, it will include some of the other things, but it will always include a Sunday roast. Now, a Sunday roast, you are going to have meat of some point. Quite often you'll get a choice. Quite often you'll have an option of either beef or lamb or pork or chicken. You'll have your roast potatoes. You'll probably have some roast parsnips. You'll have carrots. You'll have maybe another green vegetable, broccoli, peas, something else. You will have gravy, and you will have Yorkshire pudding. Guaranteed, wherever you go in a pub on a Sunday, you will have Yorkshire pudding on the menu. Now, Yorkshire pudding, I think the name confuses people because of the word pudding. I think people think it's a dessert. It's not. Yorkshire pudding, at its base, I mean, I'm from Yorkshire, so I'm a bit of a traditionalist when it comes to Yorkshire pudding. Yorkshire pudding, for me, should be served with beef. It is the traditional accompaniment to roast beef. These days, it has become the accompaniment to any roast dinner, be it a Sunday lunch, be it a Christmas dinner. My family complain at me because I am very, very strict with my traditions and I only serve Yorkshire puddings with beef. But no one's going to look at you weird if you order a roast lamb and then put a Yorkshire pudding on top, honestly. It's fairly standard these days. So a Yorkshire pudding, what is it? It's basically a pancake batter. It's the same batter that you'll get in a pancake or a crepe. And it's then cooked in a oven dish with very, very hot fat. Traditionally, it would have been done with beef dripping. I tend to use lard. I think most pubs these days use oil because it's easier and safer. But you don't get the flavour. Beef dripping is where you get the real flavour. and they puff up. And so you end up with something quite often. Sometimes they're smaller, like a muffin size, but the best ones are big like this, and they kind of come up the sides with a crater in the middle, and that's where you can put your gravy. You can get your gravy inside, and it soaks up all the gravy and the meat juices, and it's absolutely delicious. But the quality of a Yorkshire pudding can make or break a pub lunch. And if somewhere does a good lunch but not a good Yorkshire pudding, then they won't get the customers in the same way. People will go to places because they serve a good Yorkshire pudding. Some places they base everything around their Yorkshire pudding, and you can get stew inside. They make a bigger Yorkshire pudding like this, and then they put stew inside it, things like this. This is the centerpiece of a Sunday lunch, and it's the centerpiece of a pub Sunday lunch. If you want to experience this, as I say, you do need to book. Check out where you can get your best Sunday lunches. I like a country pub for a Sunday lunch. I like to go to a country pub, and preferably one where I can have a walk first and then sit in the pub for the rest of the afternoon. But there's plenty of city pubs that do good lunches, and you can always walk around the park first. Generally, it's served between noon and about 3 p.m. So don't think you can turn up at 5 p.m. and think you're going to get Sunday lunch. You won't, and quite often the kitchens will then close after Sunday lunch, and that's it for the day. Because frankly, the portion sizes, these are big plates and they are piled high. It's rare to come out of a Sunday lunch and not feel totally stuffed. And of course, that's just the main course. So after your main course of your Sunday lunch, you generally have a pudding option, a dessert option. And the dessert option will usually involve custard. It will have something like a sticky toffee pudding with custard, one of my favourites, a treacle sponge and custard. It might be a chocolate sponge with a chocolate custard. You may see other things on there. You might get crumble and custard. I know when I moved to France, I was always surprised when I got told, because they're quite keen on crumbles in France. They call it crumble, and it's very strange. But when first time I ordered a crumble in France, you get this kind of a dish with some stewed fruit and a bit of a biscuity topping, cold, and maybe a little bit of cream. And that's not what a crumble is in the UK. A crumble in a British pub, you are talking something hot. It's got fruit, but it's also then got a decent portion of a kind of biscuity topping that ends up being both stodgy and crunchy at the same time, and then a custard to soak it all up. And they can be apple crumbles, the classic, but you can get a rhubarb crumble, you can get a plum crumble. Plum crumble's very good. You don't see it very often, but it is very, very good. And that's the classic. So you've had your big Sunday roast, and then you end up having your pudding, and by this time it's 3 o'clock in the afternoon and you are not moving for the rest of the day because you can't. I just feel that most travellers miss out on this, and I think it's maybe why people don't understand British food, because this is British food. When I think about British food, this is British food. A pub during the week is British food. A pub during the week is serving you fish and chips. It's serving you pie, a steak and ale pie, or a steak and kidney pudding. It's serving you the British classics. And then on a Sunday, it serves you the most classic British thing of all, a Sunday lunch. So this is what I do when I go back to the UK. One of the first things, if I go away with my friends in the UK, or if I go back to see family in the UK, first discussion, okay, where are we having Sunday lunch? The last time I was with my friends, we were back down in the New Forest, as it happens. And the turf cutters, I think, was closed for some reason, because I did look, and it is still open, it does still exist, but it was closed this particular time. And so we ended up in a pub called the Philly that does have a slightly separate section for its restaurant, for its food, but excellent Sunday lunch. Really, really good Sunday lunch with the Yorkshire puddings, with the roast potatoes, very, very crispy. The roast potatoes should crisp on the outside, and then when you bite in, they all soft and fluffy on the inside. It's not a big chip. This is not the same as a big chip. A roast potato is a fine thing on its own. And then I had the sticky toffee pudding. Oh, sticky toffee pudding, if you don't know, it gets its toffiness from dates. So you mix up dates to get the sweet and toffee flavour. And then it's a sponge with then a toffee sauce over the top, and then custard. It's just divine, divine. So that's my tip. That's my tip for today is if you are going to England, make sure you eat in a pub at least once. Make it a regular thing, make it a daily thing. Honestly, you won't regret it. I always include, so when I do my travel plans for the UK, I will always give you at least one, probably several pub recommendations as to where you can eat in pubs. So you will get that as part of your travel itinerary. So thanks for joining us on the European Compass podcast. If you enjoyed today's episode, share it with a fellow food traveller. And don't forget to subscribe for more delicious adventures. Until next time, bon appetit and happy travels.